Welcome to Women Advancing, where the voices of today's female leaders are meeting and gathering to share their journeys, their insights, and their best practices on how they're making the world a better place through their innovation, their ingenuity, and quite frankly, purpose-driven practice. I'm Kate Byrne, editor of womenadvancing.org and the CEO of Catapult X, and our lucky host for the conversation today. Diversity and inclusion have been a lot of involved in conversation and workplace conversation, very top of mind. And usually when we hear that word, we're very quick to go to gender and to go to race. But we really need to expand our definition of diversity to include other populations. To that end, today we're really very fortunate to be joined by Ann Weeby, who's the Vice President of Workforce Innovation at Salesforce. Ann is leading up a really exciting effort that Salesforce is doing called Salesforce Military. And this is the company's military veteran and adult workforce development program to help place underrepresented talented within the Salesforce ecosystem. Now, we all know that Salesforce has always been an early mover, especially when it came to making social impact, be it through their investments, through they make their large number of employee resource groups. Well, thanks to Ann and her group's efforts, the company is helping impact policies across the country. So it's actually demonstrating that companies and corporations play a role in actually changing how government sees things as well. And what's interesting about Ann to me is she has a terrific gift at what I refer to as innovation transference. And she put a lot of creativity that she learned in putting skills from the military to work at a nonprofit called Kaboom, which built many a playground across the US. And then she's gone ahead and put them towards building this brand new effort here at Salesforce. Without further ado, I'd love to learn a little bit more about that, Ann. So welcome to Women Advancing.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. So I just have to ask this, and I hope you won't be offended, but how did you know you wanted to be in the military? Because I think that takes such courage. And I just would love to hear more. I think it says so much about you, and it makes a lot of sense with the courageous actions you're taking in building these other future entities.
Yeah, so I made the decision when I was 17, actually, to join the military. And I had seen just the way my family talked about those who served. It was my grandpa and my uncle, and there was such reverence for this job that they did. And so this little feminist said, wow, I'd love to see, what that would be like. And so I grew up in a small town as well and wanted to do something bigger than myself. So I actually joined when I was 17 and signed a 6-year contract, as so many people do who are in the service, came from kind of a rural place. And it was just my first experience with so many things, including service of all kinds.
Right, exactly. And stepping outside of a comfort zone.
Yeah.
Which you've done quite a bit. So what led you then from the way I look at it, the battleground to the playground and then Salesforce? On the outset, they're seemingly different environments. However, I know there's a common thread.
There is a common thread, and I had to figure it out. Looking back, it wasn't obvious to me as I was going through it. But my jump from my first full-time job was when I was served in Iraq at the very beginning of the war, and I did construction. And when I came out, I said, wow, I learned so much from seeing, building enemy prisoner of war camps, frankly, and, building homes for people, and thought, wow, what would that look like to do it domestically? And so my cover letter was, I know that, doing this in Iraq with translators doesn't sound like building playgrounds, but here's how I think it's transferable. And so really got to carry those skills. It was with owning it, right? And really trying to be the military civilian bridge of people who, a lot of people don't know someone who served. And so I was able to do education in my cover letter. And there were so many similarities. And then, in the nonprofit world, you see so many incredible corporations and that are supporting and funding. And so that was the other bridge of, wow, I'd love to be on the other side of this, funding and supporting. And when I got into workforce development, for me, it was, what does this look like if the employer's in the center of the conversation? And Salesforce wanted to be. Can't be training people for jobs without having, employers that wanted to do it differently and wanted to provide free training. And so the Venn diagram of all those jobs of nonprofit and government and corporation in these unique roles I was in, that is all about giving back, being part of something bigger than yourself, and just service and helping people.
Much like your family, it's in your DNA, clearly.
Yep.
Which is terrific to see. Have you seen similarities, differences in the different ecosystems? So I can imagine when you were in the military doing construction, from just being a woman and dealing with some of those different cultures, and then coming into nonprofit. And there are, I think, sometimes some differences there just from a lack of either, I want to say lack of systems, I'll put it that way. And then you come to a highly systematic Salesforce, which is one of the reasons its precision, its expansion, its ability to scale, and its seeming agility, despite the fact that it's so huge. How did you shift through all of those?
I think I found the similarities in it. And I found those things that felt like I've seen part of this before, and not the whole thing, but at least a piece of it. And so I, described how I'm like, okay, I get how a little bit of construction experience could then lead me to this opportunity to build 7 playgrounds around the country. And in the nonprofit world, there weren't the resources. And so Salesforce has all of these resources, but still had a need for innovation. And how do you figure it out? And when you had a lack of resources, you had to be really creative. And when you have an abundance of resources, you have to be creative. And so we found those transferable places, and just really brought along every piece of myself, my lived experience in the community that I had been with, as I grew and advanced. So I do see what the pieces are that are in common, even though they look completely different on the outside.
So I know that girls are very important to you. I know that one of the pieces that you of life that you're really proud about is serving on the board of Technovation. Talk a little bit about that. How did you come to find them and get involved with them? And tell us a little bit about the work that they're doing too.
Yeah, so being a part of a nonprofit was a huge part of my identity. And when I moved over to the corporate world, I needed that. I wanted to continue being in the nonprofit world in some way. And so I helped Salesforce.org at the time start the first Girls in Tech portfolio, and met a wide range of organizations that were helping girls and helping them to get exposure to tech, and really solving, you can't be what you can't see, and bringing in role models for young women, and bringing in curriculum. And so the Technovation, for me, it was just a really natural partnership. The CEO is inspirational and doing incredible work, global organization that now I get to be a part of. And I think it's really important to show girls what it's like in these companies, to explain jobs that are just emerging. And it's phenomenal networking, and just recharges my batteries every time I get to hear the stories of the impact and meet with my other board members. I just find it a source of energy.
What advice would you give others who are looking to try and find meaningful ways to put, by day, I am private sector, by night, I am nonprofit? Are there some keys? Because it's not always easy for people to get on boards. Do you have some thoughts or some pointers about how people can get on boards?
Yeah.
And how to pose and present yourself?
Yeah, I think to find the right match, I had done the walking around board match events and scrolling through, different opportunities. And when I found my match, I just knew, right? It was just a fit on both sides. To be able to find it, lead with your passion. I love it. I love the time I spend on Friday nights and weekends supporting this organization. And that has to be there in order to give the investment. And I think just talk to organizations. Pro bono is a great way in, saying, hey, I have this marketing skill, or I'm really great at fundraising. And you can be an advisor, or you can be a volunteer as a first step. And then as the board grows, it's a pretty natural transition. So I came in as I'm a funder, and then stayed with the organization, came to all of their events, and then it was a natural next step. It didn't go from stranger to board right away.
Wonderful. Let's go switch back now over to Salesforce Military, because one, it's so fun to see you come to you so light up. when you talk about the girls in the Technovation, and you do similarly when you're talking about the work you're doing with the Salesforce Military program. Talk a little bit about that. What is it? What are you proudest of about that?
Yeah, so when I got back from my deployment from Iraq, there just weren't really systems. It was a new generation that had been to war, and there was a lot of infrastructure that needed to be built for folks to have benefits and have resources and transition. And so I have stuck with making sure that no one has to live through what I did. And so I've really built a lot of the systems that now, weren't there for me and now are there for, hundreds and thousands of people. And so I get to see people thriving in tech every day. And we know that we have created really clear career pathways and lowered the bar for entry from cost and social capital for people to come in and just have a great civilian career, whether they're a veteran or a military spouse.
So what are some steps that others could do? Are there some best practices that we can encourage others who are listening to put into place? I mean, one is probably just thinking beyond, as I started, right? Gender and race when it comes to diversity. But are there specific best practices that one can take to encourage that the aperture for potential vet hires widens?
Yeah, I love this question. Thank you for asking. A non-traditional resume is sometimes spit out of a system, and it takes a human to stop and really figure out what is this experience. And so I sometimes ask people, instead of the 30 seconds you take 3 minutes on a veteran or a non-traditional resume, and really lean in and seek to understand what this person could have learned in their field or on their more interesting journey than some, that could be a benefit to the company. And we see that when companies do that, they figure out the mutually beneficial ways, and then they build it into their system. I think the other thing I'll say is, if you have a recruiter or someone who's an executive search team asking specifically, I'd like to see, you're the customer at that point. I would like to see a veteran resume, or I'd like to see some non-traditional folks, or please let me see everyone who applies instead of just who you think I may want to see. Those practices have really created opportunities for people that wouldn't otherwise have had them.
Wow, that's terrific. So now, have you done work yourself? I mean, has Salesforce, just as it has with some of its impact work, this other form of impact, have you begun to train or to share what you've learned with other corporations?
Yeah, because we're not necessarily hiring at Salesforce, we're hiring with our customers and partners. And so we've linked arms with all of these customers and partners, and bringing people together and having them share their best practices, and has been phenomenal. So we're missing the in-person events where we used to get to celebrate and share, but we have found some convening opportunities online to do that.
Terrific. And another thing that came to me is, when you are looking at some of the different companies that you are supporting in portfolios, are there certain pieces that you look for? What are they like? What are the key traits or metrics that you're looking for?
When we're looking for great companies to partner with, they're willing to innovate with us. They're willing to take a shot. Some of we've tried some strange things, frankly, to say, if someone gets this Salesforce certification, will you give them an automatic interview? And the companies that have said yes, and we're willing to shake it up a little bit, their traditional practices, have seen the success and have reaped the benefits of being kind of the first to market with some of these programs, and to capture some of the talent. I think the other companies, they're constantly educating. They're teaching both the hiring manager and the recruiting team around equality and diversity, and they're rethinking how their structure is in terms of interviews. Is it fair? Is it just a referrals or social capital? And there's a lot of trial and error, frankly. And it's great to see these companies succeed, and they're getting very, very loyal, very capable talent, and they've kind of got a secret weapon against their competitors.
That's a really good point. I love that. So folks are game, they're curious, and they're comfortable with the unknown as they go down the path less traveled by. So let's talk a little bit about the results of Salesforce Military.
One thing that comes to mind is, this has been the last 12 months with an economic crisis, we've tried to support people at scale as they've lost jobs or tried to enter new fields. And so we had a successful program that launched last year that was a fellowship. And we took $1 million investment and we worked with a nonprofit partner, and we were able to get 60 people jobs. And the goal was to just say, let's crack this experience. People really struggle with getting Salesforce experience. They get the credential, but they don't have the experience. You need that to get the job. And so we built this fellowship program, and 60 people got jobs. They were all virtual. That's a huge silver lining when you do employment, that now all these people could work from their homes or whatever, base they were outside of that they were still at. And 85% of the cohort now has gotten full-time job offers. So this didn't work to get people some paid experience as a gap. This really worked to get people into these companies. Some went to the companies where they were, some went to other companies that are in our ecosystem. But it's been really incredible to support the military community through an economic crisis, and they're really fantastic jobs as well.
Wow, that is amazing.
Yeah, so we're going to scale that for in this next year, and excited to continue to learn and help people in sort of a light internship or fellowship model, so that they can quickly move from training to full-time job.
That's seriously, congratulations.
Yeah.
That's no easy feat, especially, I mean, I sit here and I think about last year. That's huge. Congratulations.
Our fellows did the work. We matched them and they showed up, and really, from homes with a lot going on, people put their best foot forward, made impact to the company, and everyone saw it across the board. So it was just a really neat collaboration.
I love that story because it just goes to show you, when you give people a chance, more often than not, they really will show up. They want to show up in the best way. So kudos to you and the team.
Yeah.
So we're coming up to the close, and I just wanted to get, what are 3 takeaways, pearls of wisdom that you would share? And I would actually say, for people that one day would want to be in a position such as yours, where you've come from different paths and they've all melded. You grabbed onto one true north, which was service for others. How do they stay believing, but then also how do they keep themselves on track so that they can get the kind of position that you have?
I think that's the first thing that I alluded to, and it took me longer than I wanted to admit, but own your story. Windy paths are unique, and no one has a story like me. And I found, once I started to own that, I found that to be a real source of, it was a little bit of superpower for me to show up and say, oh, I can talk about this from lots of different industries and lots of different levels.
Right.
As a junior when I was in the military, and so, sometimes I'm shy about that. And when I say, no, I was low level enlisted, and it really speaks to the distance traveled. And yeah, I was shy for too long, certainly. The second thing I'll say is, be relevant. This has been especially important as we, been in the pandemic, but there are lots of great ideas and things that can be done, but it has to be in context, and you have to get the timing right. And so for the fellowship example, it just all stars aligned, leadership was brought in. But I think if you're just trying to move with resistance, you need to understand why that's happening and go where the wind is in your sails. And the last thing I will say is, bring others along. This for me has been just something people did for me, is not just mentored me through conversations. They mentored me to putting me right at the table and giving me the microphone. And now I'm finding myself in these opportunities where I'm asked to speak, and I'm bringing someone along to share their story as well, or using opportunities to really just have people not just shadow, but lead work that, that was essential for me to get to where I am.
I think that is that notion of the +1 when you're asked to speak, and also the notion of sponsorship versus mentorship, where you're going to be having someone who's going to make room for you at the table, whether you're there or not, but you'll always have a presence there. are so key. And I think especially in this coming decade, especially now that the administration is now going to have this gender equity council, which I'm really excited about. I think now more than ever, as we female leaders witness those stepping into power and having success, that we celebrate, versus historically sometimes there have been some who've brought others down, or there's been just moments of, I guess, humanity. And I think it's so important for everyone just to realize, oh my gosh, when someone else succeeds, it's just a mirror of what's to come for you.
Yeah, to think from a place of abundance, and and know that the room is going to get crowded, and that's a beautiful thing. And you want to bring as many women, as many veterans, as many people as from your community in as possible.
I completely agree. I cannot wait until it's standing room only.
Indeed.
Wonderful. Well, listen, thank you so much, Ann. It's been a pure delight, and I can't wait to have future conversations and see what else you're able to do and able to achieve.
Yeah,
So
thank you so much, Kate.
I really appreciate it. For those of you listening, I just want to say thank you so much for joining. I know you have a choice as to where to spend your time and how and with whom, and I'm just really glad you chose to spend it with us.